There are no accidents in the kingdom. If you are watching this, pause for a moment. Because this is not by chance. You didn't stumble here. You were summoned. Destiny has a way of calling you even when you're not looking for it. This is not a video, this is a divine interruption. God has something to tell His chosen one. And that chosen one is you. Before the foundations of the earth were laid, heaven had a meeting. And in that meeting your name was spoken. Not the name they gave you in the hospital, but the name heaven knows you by. The name connected to your assignment. The name tied to a purpose so great, hell has been trying to stop you since birth. There are no coincidences in the kingdom of God. What many people call chance, the kingdom calls divine orchestration. And when we talk about being chosen by God, we are not talking about a shallow label or a trendy phrase. We are talking about a divine reality that predates your birth, your background, and even your belief. If this message has found you today, you need to understand something crucial. This isn't just another video, another sermon clip, or another moment of casual inspiration. This is a spiritual appointment. This is a kingdom summons. There's a reason why something in your spirit stirred the moment you heard the words, God's chosen one. Something on the inside of you stood up. That's not entertainment, that's recognition. Because your spirit always knows what your mind hasn't fully understood yet. Deep calls unto deep. And when the voice of God speaks, those who are truly chosen don't just listen, they respond. You are not watching this video by mistake. You didn't click by chance. You may think the algorithm brought you here, but what you're really experiencing is divine alignment. Heaven has a way of locating the called, even in the most unexpected places. God doesn't need a church building, a pulpit, or a choir to speak to His chosen. Sometimes all He needs is a screen and your undivided attention. And right now, in this very moment, something holy is happening. This is your burning bush moment. The moment when God breaks into your regular day with a voice that demands attention. And like Moses, you may be wandering in the wilderness of confusion, frustration, or routine. But the wilderness is not a place of punishment for the chosen. It's a place of preparation. God calls His deliverers in obscurity. He finds His prophets among shepherds. He identifies kings in fields where no one's looking, because man looks at the outer appearance, but God sees destiny. Some of you have been praying for confirmation. You've been asking God to show you if there's more to your life than what you're currently experiencing. You've asked, Lord, why do I feel this pull? Why do I feel unsettled with the ordinary? Why do I feel like I was born for something greater even when I don't see it yet? And this is the answer. This message is not just a video, it's your confirmation. It's your burning bush, it's your wake-up call. God always speaks to His chosen at critical junctures. He doesn't shout when you're in the crowd. He waits until you're alone, quiet, maybe even discouraged. Because then your ears are finally open. It's in the wilderness moments when you're ready to listen, and this is one of those moments. He's been waiting for your attention. He's been waiting for your agreement. Because heaven never forces, heaven invites. But make no mistake, when God invites, it's always for a reason. This is not just about you watching a word. This is about heaven sending a word to you. You were summoned. That word carries weight. It means you were intentionally called. You were selected. You were marked for a divine encounter. Just like Samuel was called in the quiet of the night, just like Paul was stopped on the road to Damascus, just like Elijah heard the still small voice after the storm, so are you being called right now. When you are summoned, it means there's something waiting for you on the other side of your obedience. You may not know the full picture, but you know enough to realize that this moment matters. You feel it in your chest. You sense it in your spirit. The distractions of your life might be loud, but this voice is louder, not in volume, but in clarity. This is the moment when the fog starts to clear, when identity starts to awaken, when purpose begins to break through the soil of your confusion. Many people miss their calling because they dismiss divine interruptions as coincidences. But not you. You're here because your spirit has been sensitive enough to pick up on what others ignore. You've felt the nudge. You've felt the uneasiness of living below your potential. You've seen the signs, heard the whispers, and now God is making it plain. You are chosen. The enemy wants you to believe that your life is ordinary, that your pain was pointless, that your wandering has been wasted, but God is speaking louder. I have called you by name. You are mine. And when He calls you, everything changes, not instantly in your circumstances, but deeply in your awareness. You begin to carry yourself differently. You begin to see trials not as setbacks, but as training. You begin to realize that the pull you feel is not frustration. It's your calling trying to be born. You've been summoned not just to be blessed, but to become a blessing. Not just to be healed, but to carry healing. Not just to be saved, but to become a sign. That's what happens when God calls a person. He doesn't just fix their life. He assigns them to change others. He makes you a vessel, a voice, a representative of His kingdom. And if you're still wondering why me, let me tell you, God never chooses the qualified. He qualifies the chosen. You may not feel ready, worthy, or equipped, but that's how every chosen one starts. Because the call doesn't come when you're confident. It comes when you're available. And right now you are available. You're listening, you're leaning in, you're seeking. So hear this clearly. You were not scrolling randomly. You were not searching aimlessly. You were not watching this by accident. You were summoned by the One who saw your end before your beginning, who knew your name before the world did, who wrote your purpose in ink that cannot be erased by failure, fear, or delay. This is your moment. You've been called, and the next move is yours. Not the name they gave you in the hospital, but the name heaven knows you by. That sentence may sound poetic, but it carries a revelation so deep that it can change how you see yourself forever. You see, the world has been naming people for generations. It gives us names based on culture, tradition, trends, or even family legacy. But God, He doesn't call you based on the label someone else gave you. He calls you based on what He placed inside of you. When heaven looks at you, it doesn't see your job title, your GPA, your follower count, or the mistakes you've made. Heaven sees assignment. Heaven sees intention. Heaven sees identity. And that identity is rooted in your original design. Not the version of yourself that has been damaged, distracted, or discouraged, but the purest version of you, the one God envisioned before you were even formed in your mother's womb. When God created you, He did it with precision. You are not a mass-produced product on the assembly line of humanity. You were custom built. Heaven doesn't do duplicates. You carry something unique that nobody else carries. Not even people with your same background, skin color, accent, or last name. There is a divine fingerprint on your life, and that fingerprint carries a name that is deeper than anything on your birth certificate. You may have spent years trying to fit into names that were never yours. Maybe people labeled you as lazy, rebellious, broken, too quiet, too loud, too ambitious, or too emotional. Maybe you were given names by life experiences, names like failure, unworthy, forgotten, or not enough. But none of those names came from heaven. They came from wounded people or wounded situations. And today, God is stripping those names away. He is reintroducing you to you. That's what He did with Gideon. Gideon saw himself as the weakest in his clan, a nobody from a nowhere place. But when God appeared to him, He didn't call him by his insecurity. He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." God didn't speak to Gideon's history. He spoke to Gideon's destiny. And that's what God is doing right now with you. Heaven never addresses you by your fear. It always speaks to your future. God is not intimidated by your dysfunction. He sees through it. When he looked at Jacob, a deceiver and manipulator, he still saw Israel, a prince with God. When he looked at Peter, a hot-headed fisherman with a tendency to deny under pressure, he still saw a rock upon which he would build his church. When he looked at Saul, a religious persecutor of Christians, he still saw Paul, a world-changing apostle of grace. The problem is we often agree more with what people said about us than what God says to us. We rehearse the insults more than we reflect on the promises. We allow culture, trauma, and insecurity to define us instead of leaning into the identity God whispered over us before we ever took our first breath. But it's time to wake up, because when you don't know who you are, you will never understand what you carry. Your real name is connected to your assignment. That's why the enemy works overtime to keep you confused. If he can keep you distracted with false identities, you'll never walk in divine purpose. That's why some of you have felt so lost, not because you don't have value, but because you've been operating under a false name. You've been living out a version of yourself that was shaped by fear, shame, rejection, or the pressure to please people. But God is calling you back. He's saying, I know your real name. I know the one I gave you. I know what I breathed into you when I sent you to earth. You are not overlooked. You are not average. You are not forgotten. You are chosen. And your name is written in a heavenly place where no man's opinion can erase it. When Jesus changed Simon's name to Peter, it wasn't just a name change, it was an identity shift. It was God saying, you've seen yourself as unstable, impulsive, unpredictable, but I see you as a rock. Do you know how radical that is? God looked at a man who kept failing and gave him a name that meant stability. That's what grace does. It doesn't describe you based on where you've been. It calls you based on where you're going. Some of you have been hiding behind names that sound safe. I'm just a mom. I'm just a student. I'm just trying to survive. But heaven is calling you more. Heaven is calling you higher. Because you're not just here to survive. You're here to build, to restore, to reveal, to release something the world has been waiting on. That's why the enemy fights your identity so fiercely. Because your identity unlocks your assignment. If the devil can convince you that you're ordinary, he doesn't have to worry about you being dangerous. But the moment you start seeing yourself the way God sees you, you become a problem for hell. You become a threat. You become light in a dark place. You become the answer to somebody else's prayer. Because chosen people don't just live for themselves, they live for the kingdom. They live for impact. And that begins with knowing who you are, not who you've been pretending to be, not who people want you to be, but who heaven knows you are. That's the name God is awakening in you today. The one tied to your divine DNA, the one connected to your purpose. So even if no one else sees you, God does. Even if people try to define you by your past, God calls you by your purpose. Even if you feel small, He knows the giant inside of you. He's not speaking to who you've settled to become. He's speaking to who you were sent to become. The true you, the called you, the anointed you, the chosen one. The enemy isn't fighting you because of where you've been. He's fighting you because of where you're headed. That statement alone explains so many of the battles, setbacks, and storms you've endured. You see, the enemy doesn't waste ammunition. He doesn't invest his energy into something that doesn't pose a threat to the kingdom of darkness. The reason your life has felt like a battlefield isn't because you're weak. It's because you carry something dangerous. You carry purpose, and the enemy knows it. Even if you don't fully recognize the weight of it yet, He does. People often think spiritual warfare is punishment, but that's a lie. It's actually proof that you are valuable, proof that your destiny matters, proof that you are carrying something worth stealing, silencing, or stopping. What you're experiencing isn't chaos for the sake of chaos. It's strategic. Hell is threatened by what heaven placed in you. That's why the attacks are personal, persistent, and precise. They're not random, they're targeted. The enemy is not attacking your past. Your past is already behind you. He's attacking your future. He's afraid of who you're becoming. That's why you've seen resistance increase as your clarity has grown. That's why every time you take a step forward, something tries to knock you 2 steps back. It's not just life, it's warfare. And it's because you're stepping into your true identity. You're starting to wake up to who you really are. And when that happens, all of hell takes notice. The more valuable the assignment, the more vicious the opposition. But understand this, the devil is not after your car, your house, your job, or even your relationships. Those are just the smoke. The real fire is about your calling. If he can discourage you enough to quit, distract you enough to delay, or deceive you enough to settle, he wins. Not because he took your purpose away. He doesn't have that power. But because he convinced you to walk away from it yourself. Think about it. Jesus was sinless, perfect, the Son of God, yet he was tempted, opposed, and attacked throughout his life. Why? Because of his mission, because of what he came to release on earth. The attack started early. Even as a baby, King Herod tried to kill him. Why would a ruler feel threatened by an infant? Because even hell knew that purpose starts early. That's why some of you have been under attack since childhood. It wasn't just bad parenting, it wasn't just trauma. It was a spiritual attempt to bury your identity before it ever had a chance to bloom. The enemy fears what you will become. If you ever realize how chosen you are, he fears what will happen when you step fully into the anointing God placed on your life. That's why confusion has been so heavy. That's why you've had moments where you've wanted to give up, walk away, numb the pain, or question your worth. It's not because you're weak. It's because the fight against you has been intense. But here's what you need to know. The fight has never been about your strength. It's always been about your seed. What do I mean by that? I mean the potential inside you, the destiny, the divine deposit God placed in you before the foundation of the world. That's the seed. And seeds are always fought the hardest before they become trees. The enemy knows that if your seed ever grows roots, if it ever starts to bear fruit, there will be ripple effects beyond your life. Your healing will lead to healing for others. Your breakthrough will lead others into theirs. Your story will unlock deliverance in people you haven't even met yet. That's why he tried to silence you. That's why he tried to keep you in cycles. That's why every time you made progress, something tried to pull you back into bondage. Because free people. He knows that if you ever rise, you won't rise alone. You'll take others with you. You'll break generational curses. You'll shift atmospheres. You'll change legacies. And that terrifies him. So don't mistake the presence of warfare for the absence of calling. In fact, it's often the opposite. The warfare increases when you get closer to your assignment. You felt it when you decided to step up, to take your faith seriously, to walk in obedience, to break off toxic habits, or to pursue your God-given dream. All of a sudden, the enemy came with distractions, delays, discouragement, and division. That's not a sign to stop. It's a sign you're on the right path. One of the enemy's greatest strategies is to convince the chosen that they're just surviving when they are born to conquer. He wants you to forget that you are royalty, that you have authority, that you are a child of God who has access to divine strategy, heavenly wisdom, and the power of the Holy Spirit. If he can get you to live like a victim, he doesn't have to worry about you living like a victor. But today the lie is being broken. Today you're being reminded of who you are and whose you are. You are not being attacked because you're cursed. You're being attacked because you carry glory. The glory is heavy, the calling is costly, but it is real. And no demon in hell can take it from you. You may be in a storm, but that storm isn't there to destroy you. It's there to reveal you. The pressure you're feeling isn't a sign of defeat. It's the contraction before birthing. It's the stretching before stepping into new territory. And it hurts, but it's holy. It's confusing, but it's necessary. The warfare didn't come to end you. It came to expose you to your own strength. It came to push you into deeper dependence on God. It came to reveal the power of His Spirit working through you, not just around you. So if you've been asking why the attacks have been so intense, why you felt overwhelmed, or why you've been facing resistance from every side, let this be your answer. Because you're chosen, because you matter, because you were born for such a time as this. The battle is not a sign that you're off track. It's a signal that you're on the edge of something greater. You don't need to be afraid of the fight. The presence of warfare is evidence that the enemy still sees you as a threat, and that means God still sees you as valuable. So stand firm, don't give up, don't lose sight of the vision. The attacks will not have the final word. God will. You are not alive at this moment in history by accident. You are not breathing today just to survive another day. You are not on earth simply to make money, pay bills, or chase empty validation. No, you were assigned to this generation, sent by God with an intentional placement. Every chosen one is born on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose, and that purpose is always bigger than comfort. It's always connected to kingdom impact. There's something deeply divine about your timing. You could have been born in any century, any era, under any conditions, but God chose now. He aligned your birth with what this generation would need. That's why you feel things differently. That's why you carry this internal tension between what is and what could be. That's why you can't sit still while the world falls apart. It's because you were sent here, not just born here. And when someone is sent, it means they came with instruction, they came with authority, they came with a reason. The chosen ones are never accidental. The enemy might try to distract them with identity confusion or delay them with doubt, but he can never delete the assignment. The reason you felt misunderstood most of your life is because you were not built to blend in. You were wired for disruption. You were designed to carry a different sound, a different fire, a different kind of calling that challenges the status quo. That's why you don't feel satisfied in shallow places. That's why mediocrity makes your spirit restless. Because there's something inside you crying out for more. That more is your divine assignment speaking. This generation isn't looking for another trend. It's desperate for truth. It's searching for realness, for wholeness, for the presence of God wrapped in the skin of ordinary people who know they've been marked by heaven. You are one of those people. That's why your heart burns the way it does. You've tried to ignore it, you've tried to silence it, you've tried to go with the flow, but you can't escape what you were born to do. Destiny doesn't die just because you delayed it. It waits, it calls, it groans. Because it knows it was assigned to make impact through you. And it's not about having a pulpit or a platform. You don't need a microphone to be a mouthpiece for heaven. Some chosen ones are meant to lead nations, others to lead a classroom, a household, a business, or even just one broken heart at a time. The scale doesn't matter, the obedience does. God isn't measuring your assignment by how many eyes see it, but by how faithful you are with it. Your assignment is sacred because it carries God's fingerprints, not because it's glamorous in the world's eyes. Some of you have been asking, why do I feel so out of place? Why do I feel like I don't belong anywhere? It's because you are never meant to belong everywhere. Chosen people are set apart. That means your language will be different. Your hunger will be different. Your convictions will be different. And sometimes that isolation is preparation. It's not punishment, it's positioning. God pulls you away before He launches you forward. He hides you before He exposes you. Because He cares more about your foundation than your appearance. Before David ever killed Goliath, he was in the field with sheep. Before Esther ever stood before a king, she was hidden in obscurity. Before Joseph ever sat in a palace, he was in a pit and a prison. Why? Because divine assignments require divine preparation. God develops the chosen ones in secret. He strengthens them in silence. He shapes them in struggle. Because when you're carrying something eternal, you can't be built with what is temporary. The pressure you felt is not a sign that you're in the wrong place. It's a sign that you're in the right hands. Chosen doesn't mean easy. It means necessary. You were born to be a solution in a time of crisis. You were born to be light in the middle of darkness. And if this generation has felt heavy to carry, it's because your shoulders were built to carry weight. God placed you in this moment of history, not just to exist, but to shift it. You're not here to echo the world. You're here to transform it. Not with your opinions, not with noise, but with power. Every generation has had its revivalists, reformers, warriors, and watchmen. This one will be no different. But the names may look different. The faces may be unconventional. And the voices may not sound like the religious traditions of the past. Because God is raising up a remnant. People who are hungry, holy, and humble. People who carry fire in their bones, even if they don't have titles in front of their names. People like you. And if the enemy has been whispering that you're too late, too flawed, too far gone, or too unqualified, rebuke that lie. That's not God speaking. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He anoints the willing. He empowers the surrendered. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to say yes. Heaven will handle the rest. Your yes will unlock doors you didn't know existed. Your yes will shift the lives of people you haven't even met yet. There are divine connections waiting for you on the other side of your obedience. There are doors only your voice can open. There are people who will never know Jesus until they encounter Him through your life. And that's not to pressure you, it's to awaken you. Because this is not about religion, this is about purpose, it's about kingdom, it's about eternity. God saw the brokenness of this generation and chose you as one of the answers. You were assigned to this moment, not to compete, not to compare, but to contribute, to stand in the gap, to rise when others retreat, to speak truth when others stay silent, to love deeply, live boldly, and lead courageously. Your generation is groaning for something real, and you carry that realness inside you, not because of who you are, but because of who He is in you. The time for hiding is over. The time for doubting is done. The time for shrinking back has passed. You are not behind, you are right on time. And the world is not waiting for a perfect version of you. It's waiting for the available version of you. The obedient version, the authentic version, the version that says, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Sometimes the pain you've endured wasn't meant to punish you, it was meant to prepare you. The confusion, the betrayal, the loneliness, the rejection, it all had purpose behind it. When you're chosen by God, life doesn't always look the way you imagined. There are twists in the road that seem unfair, delays that feel cruel, and disappointments that hit so hard you start to question your very identity. But what if the very things that made you cry were the things God used to qualify you? What if what you thought was breaking you was actually building you? Chosen people often go through a process that looks more like pain than promotion. Before the crown comes the crushing. Before the mantle comes the molding. Before the elevation comes the isolation. God allows certain trials not to destroy you, but to deepen you. Because what you're called to carry cannot rest on shallow foundations. He knows your destiny, and He knows that without a certain level of brokenness, you'd never develop the character, the humility, or the spiritual sensitivity needed to sustain it. You can't lead with compassion if you've never known sorrow. You can't speak with authority if you've never been silenced. You can't extend real grace if you've never needed it yourself. That's why your journey has been different. That's why you've walked through things others didn't understand. That's why your path didn't look like theirs, because your calling isn't like theirs. God never wastes pain, especially in the life of someone He's chosen. The very thing you tried to pray away might have been the thing He used to awaken the greatness inside you. Pain has a strange way of sharpening vision. It makes you see what really matters. It strips away the illusions. It forces you to go deeper. And in those moments, those low, quiet, gut-wrenching moments, you discover God in ways you never knew Him before. You stop performing, you stop pretending, you stop reaching for shallow comfort, and you fall into the arms of real power. That's where God meets you. Not just on the mountaintop, but in the valley. Not just in your victories, but in your vulnerability. If you've ever asked, why did I have to go through that? The heartbreak, the failure, the abandonment. Know this, God doesn't orchestrate evil, but He does redeem it. He allows certain doors to close so you don't settle in places that were never designed to hold your future. He lets some people walk away, not to hurt you, but to protect you. He permits seasons of lack so you learn how to lean, not on your own strength, but on His sufficiency, because the greatest preparation often happens in the most painful places. You can't be a deliverer if you've never been bound. You can't be a healer if you've never been hurt. You can't carry the oil if you've never been pressed. The crushing is not a curse. It's a divine pressing. It's producing something in you that comfort never could. You may not see it while you're in it, but when you come out, because you will come out, you'll carry wisdom, authority, and spiritual weight that only pain can produce. You'll walk differently, speak differently, love differently, because you've been through something and you survived. The enemy thought your pain would be your end, but what he didn't see coming was the way it would ignite a fire in you. He thought the divorce would break you, but it made you pray deeper. He thought the loss would paralyze you, but it birthed vision. He thought the depression would silence you, but it gave you empathy for others. You've become dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, not because of your perfection, but because of your endurance, because you refused to quit. Because something inside of you kept saying, there has to be more than this. And there is more. The pain was not the final chapter. It was the prologue to purpose. It was the soil in which your calling was planted. Seeds don't grow on glass tables. They grow underground, in the dark, in the dirt, in hidden places. You felt buried, but God was planting you. He was covering you, not to suffocate you, but to protect the process. Because chosen ones can't be exposed too early. If you bloom before you're ready, the very weight of the spotlight can crush what wasn't yet mature. That's why you had to be hidden. That's why you had to be processed. Sometimes God will break your heart to save your soul. Sometimes He will let what you thought you wanted slip through your fingers, only to place something greater in your hands later. He will test your motives, refine your desires, and strip you of your ego until all that remains is pure surrender. That's when He knows you're ready. That's when He starts opening doors no man can shut. Because now you don't want it for status, you want it for service. Now you don't crave applause, you crave impact. Pain births purpose when you let God interpret it. It's not just about what happened to you, but about what's being produced in you through it. Some of the greatest voices, leaders, creators, and intercessors are people who've wrestled with darkness and came out drenched in light. Their scars are their sermons. Their wounds are their wisdom. And God uses it all. He uses the parts of you that you tried to hide, the nights you cried, the moments you didn't think you'd make it, the breakdowns that turned into breakthroughs. It's all part of the story. You might still be in the middle of your process. Maybe you're still carrying the weight of unspoken pain, still walking through a storm no one else can see. But even now, especially now, God is with you. He is not intimidated by your confusion. He is not distant from your heartbreak. He is not offended by your questions. He is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And what you're going through is not a detour from destiny. It's part of the path. So don't despise the pain. Don't curse the process. Don't let bitterness take root. Let it shape you, deepen you, refine you. Let it make you more like Christ. Because one day you look back and realize it didn't break you, it built you. And you'll carry that story not with shame but with power, because when God redeems pain, it becomes a weapon. And you, chosen one, were born to wield it. There's a cost to being chosen, a real cost. It's not something people see from the outside, but it's something you feel deep in your spirit. When God marks you, He doesn't just bless you with gifts. He burdens you with responsibility. And that weight doesn't feel light. It feels heavy. It feels sacred. It feels different. Because being chosen doesn't mean you get to walk through life carefree. It means you walk through life carrying something eternal, something divine, something that requires everything from you. The world will look at chosen ones and often envy their favor, admire their influence, or praise their voice. But what the world doesn't see is the crushing behind the calling. It doesn't see the nights of wrestling with God. It doesn't see the hours of silence when you prayed but heard nothing. It doesn't see the moments where you were surrounded by people but felt completely alone. Because when God chooses someone, He also sets them apart. And part of being set apart means walking roads others never have to walk. You might feel that right now, that loneliness, that isolation, that weight. You try to explain it, but people just don't understand. They tell you to take it easy or lighten up or just be normal, but you can't. Not because you don't want to, but because something inside of you refuses to settle. Something inside of you knows there's more. Something inside of you aches for something bigger than comfort, and that something is your assignment. The calling of a chosen one is not just about doing great things, it's about becoming someone who can carry great things. And that process often requires sacrifice. Sometimes it means letting go of relationships you once cherished. Sometimes it means saying no to things that look good but aren't God. Sometimes it means staying in seasons of preparation longer than your flesh would like. The cost is high because the oil is pure. You can't carry fire and expect to remain comfortable. Fire consumes. Fire refines. Fire purifies. Jesus Himself was chosen, He was anointed, He was sent, but His life was marked by sacrifice, surrender, and service. He didn't come to be served, He came to serve. He didn't come to build a fan base, He came to establish a kingdom. And that kingdom required Him to lay down everything, His will, His comfort, His life. That's the real picture of what it means to be chosen, not popularity but purpose, not applause but obedience, not self-promotion but self-denial. When you're truly chosen, you learn quickly that this walk is not about being seen. It's about being surrendered. It's about saying yes to God when no one is watching. It's about showing up in secret when the spotlight is turned off. It's about doing the hard, holy work of becoming who He called you to be, even when no one claps for it. And the truth is, the more God wants to use you publicly, the more He will refine you privately. He's not building a platform, He's building a person. Chosen ones carry weight in the Spirit. They are sensitive to things others ignore. They weep over things others laugh at. They see potential in places others call hopeless. They hear God's voice in places others hear only noise. That sensitivity comes with a price, because when you feel deeply, you hurt deeply. When you care deeply, you sacrifice deeply. And when you love deeply, you're often misunderstood. But don't let that discourage you. Let it confirm that you are on the path of the chosen. There will be seasons when you want to quit, times when you look around and wonder why your life can't be simple, why your heart feels so heavy, why it seems like others are coasting while you're constantly in spiritual warfare. But remember, God disciplines those He loves. He stretches those He trusts. He challenges those He's called. If you feel the pressure, it's because there's purpose inside of you that refuses to stay dormant. The warfare around you is often a reflection of the destiny ahead of you. And yes, the cost is high. It costs your pride, it costs your comfort, it costs your plans. Sometimes it even costs your reputation. But what you gain is worth far more. You gain intimacy with God that money can't buy. You gain clarity of purpose that fame can't offer. You gain a peace that surpasses understanding, even in the middle of storms. And you gain the joy of knowing that your life is aligned with heaven. Chosen ones are not perfect, but they are postured. They are postured in humility, postured in surrender, postured in willingness. God doesn't need your perfection, He needs your permission. He needs your yes, your obedience, your willingness to say, God, not my will but yours. That's where the power is. That's where the anointing flows. That's where miracles begin. People will look at you and see strength, but they won't see the secret place you run to when you feel weak. They'll see wisdom, but they won't know it was born from nights of wrestling with doubt. They'll see favor, but they won't see the fire you walked through to get there. That's okay. Let them see the fruit. You just keep tending the roots. Keep staying faithful in the quiet, because your life is not about applause. It's about assignment. You may not feel qualified, but God doesn't choose based on credentials. He chooses based on calling. He doesn't look at your past, He looks at your potential. He sees the broken places and still says, that one's mine. Because He knows that through you, He can reach people no one else can reach. He can break chains that have run through generations. He can bring light to places that have been in darkness for decades. He can raise up a voice in you that silences the lies of the enemy. So yes, there's a cost to being chosen, but there's also a reward of purpose, a reward of presence, a reward of legacy. What you do with your life, how you respond to this calling, will echo far beyond your years on this earth. You were not just chosen to be blessed, you were chosen to be a blessing, to shift atmospheres, to break cycles, to open doors for those coming behind you. And when you say yes, heaven backs you up. Angels are assigned, power is released, and the world begins to change, one obedient life at a time. So if this video found you, it wasn't by accident. This was a divine interruption, a reminder, a confirmation, a wake-up call. You are not random. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are chosen, handpicked by God before time began, set apart for a purpose greater than you can imagine. And yes, the journey has been painful. Yes, the process has been long, but everything you've walked through was preparing you for this moment. The rejection, the trials, the lonely nights, the tears nobody saw. God saw them all. And He's about to use every bit of it. This is not the time to shrink back. This is not the time to question your value. This is the time to rise, to stand, to say with boldness, Lord, here I am, send me. Because the world is waiting on the manifestation of God's chosen. The darkness is trembling, not because of your strength, but because of the one who lives inside you. Your voice carries weight. Your story carries power. Your obedience will unlock destinies, shift atmospheres, and break generational chains. You were born for this, called for this, anointed for this. And now it's time. Time to walk in what God already spoke over you. Time to stop doubting and start declaring. Time to stop hiding and start moving. You are not just someone watching a video. You are a vessel of the kingdom. So take the pain, the purpose, the fire, the faith, and step into your assignment, because the world needs what God placed inside you. You are God's chosen one, and the time is now.